在今天的单元，想跟大家分享一些修辞的方式。那这些方式呢，可以用在演说或简报当中，让我们很快速的介绍内容的重点，创造小惊喜。Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast。I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast. 我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. Nearly 200 episodes ago, back in episode 37, we talked about parallelism. And since then, we've covered a lot on rhetorical devices. And for any of our fans who follow our Instagram communication R&D, you'll find that recently we've been putting a lot of information up about how to use rhetorical devices. Well, today, we don't want to get too deep into the nuance, but we do want to talk about a more practical application where, these sound fancy and fun in theory, but are they being used in the real world? So we've pulled some examples of famous speeches or well-known speeches that are using rhetorical devices, and specifically, they're just using a very interesting way of contrasting ideas in very basic, plain terms, but that contrast can create powerful speeches.
我们在 IG Communication R&D 这个 account 当中，其实我们每个礼拜都会介绍一些修辞的一些小技巧，但是我们也非常了解，因为我们平常在用英文做沟通的时候，我们不会去记这个修辞技巧的名字是什么，我们比较在乎要怎么样拿来用它，或者是不是真的有人在用这些修辞的技巧。那其实你如果仔细的去听，你去观察，你会发现呢，这些技巧，这些修辞的方式 It's everywhere. It's in TED Talks, it's in email writing, it's in speeches, it's everywhere. 今天我们就想要给大家一些不同的 examples, 让大家更了解说其实这些修辞的方式是非常好使用的。
What makes contrasting so powerful is that in a speech, when done very well, it can subvert expectations. Sometimes you will look at the name of a speech or you will hear someone say a sentence and your brain naturally goes, I know what's coming next.
Right.
For the same reason that what usually makes a modern movie really exciting or interesting is they take something the audience expects and then they turn it around on them, where what you naturally thought was going to be the next scene or the next movement that a character is going to make, they do something opposite. So we pulled out a few examples from TED Talks and speeches where you can see this work and why it becomes so powerful. In fact, our first two examples come from the top 25 most TED Talks of all time, starting with Celeste Headley's talk, 10 Ways to Have a Better Conversation.
那刚刚 Nick 有讲到，我们就是利用一些 contrasting， 也就是对立的一些主题，将我们重点非常快速的带出，也能够引起大家的兴趣。那在今天刚刚我们所讲的这个 Celeste Headley 他的一个 TED Talk 10 Ways to Have a Better Conversation， 那因为通常大家可能听到 conversation 就会想到我们要怎么说话，我们要怎么问问题，所以呢他很聪明的就利用这个技巧，在他的TED Talk 一刚开始他就说 Many of you have already heard a lot of advice on this. Things like look the person in the eye, think of interesting topics to discuss in advance, look, nod, and smile to show that you're paying attention. Repeating back what you said and heard as summarized it. So what I want you to forget all of it. It is crap.
This plays right into that idea of, through her title, you have a certain expectation. Oh, how do I talk better?
Right.
How do I use my body language to show my interest? But her entire talk is about the power of listening. So at the very beginning, she goes, this is what you think you know, and I'm telling you it's all crap. That's just a fun way to use the title and the opening of your speech as a way to turn around what people think by making the strong contrast. The best power of a conversationalist is their ability to listen, not talk.
所以在他 TED Talk 的刚开始，他就呈现这个 contrasting idea， 很快速的观众就可以进入状况，然后把忘掉很多其他他们之前所听过的东西。So I think it's a really amazing way to open a conversation.
Our next example comes from the most watched TED Talk of all time, Sir Ken Robinson's Do Schools Kill Creativity? What makes this presentation so powerful, aside from the fact that he never uses a PowerPoint, he just stands on stage and tells a story, is that he uses very simple and straightforward words, but the way he plays with the wording, and in our example, gives contrasts, brings home a point that is really smart, but it's very simple to say. In his example, he says, I believe this passionately, that we don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it. Or rather, we get educated out of it.
我觉得他这个用的这个 pattern 非常的有趣。You don't grow into creativity, you grow out of it. Or rather, you educate it out of it, right? 我觉得最后面那个部分是非常的 powerful， 因为你会觉得说 education 通常是来帮助我们增加我们的 creativity， 但是他在讲说 actually it kills the creativity.
Another great example that he gives is talking about the common advice that people give, or the things that people have heard over and over about stereotypes, that artists and musicians don't make money, so these are not careers that you should pursue. And he starts to give advice that shows that it's not just about the career. There's so many other benefits to these things, so you shouldn't look at it this way. But he does a very strong contrast, very similar to our first example, where he says, don't do music. You are not going to be a musician. Don't do art. You won't be an artist. Benign advice. Now, profoundly mistaken.
I love it because so many parents out there, especially Asian parents, I think, we often tell kids, don't do music, don't do art, you're going to starve, right? 你会变得非常饿，没有工作可以做。But obviously with social media and everything nowadays, everyone with talents, they can definitely earn living. So benign advice, now profoundly mistaken.
The most fun of that is computer games are now a
know.
very lucrative business on the internet. Whereas parents from when I was a child tell even before that, oh, this is such a waste of time. Our kids are never going to survive. What are you going to do with all this time wasted in your life? And now there are people making millions of dollars just playing video games on the internet.
Exactly. So the next one, and you need to listen to this very carefully. This is another really amazing way of him using like similar pattern, but illustrating very contrasting idea. So he said, if all the insects were to disappear from the earth, within 50 years, all lives on earth would end. If all human beings disappeared from the earth, within 50 years, all forms of life would flourish.
I love this because it's such a powerful idea where it's literally the same two sentences with 3 words switched out, like switching out insects and humans and end to flourish. Just making these quick swaps creates such a strong image in someone's mind, but at the same time, there's nothing difficult about these sentences, and it's literally the same sentence pattern. You will find in presentation and speech giving, people try and use this very often. A lot of political slogans will also play with this, but sometimes it's just a matter of switching 1 or 2 words to contrast the 2 ideas.
Now, let's talk about these more old school examples that I think a lot of you guys would know. Martin Luther King, I had a dream, right? 大家应该都知道他这个 speech. Now, he used a lot of these rhetorical devices.
Now, of course, everyone knows this is I have a dream speech. But funny enough, this section doesn't come until much later in the speech. But because he gives this contrast constantly that's so powerful, beginning with that line, I have a dream, that A, not B. So here's a great example of one of those lines where he says, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of the skin, but by the content of their character. And over again, he gives lines similar to this saying, they will not be judged, or they will not A, it will be B. And this is where that original idea of parallelism really comes back in. But that happens over and over again, and it makes his speech so memorable.
So the next example, it's something that we actually started everything with. It's the Obama speech, right? 他在竞选总统的时候，他就说过了, There is not a liberal America and conservative America. There is a United States of America. There is not a Black America and a White America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
So you can see throughout history, whether it's Dr. King or President Obama, it's the same usage of language. It's the same ideas where it's not these very difficult, fanciful words. It's very concrete thoughts just built out in these patterns that make them memorable and connect with the audience. And so when it comes to building a presentation, building a speech, or thinking about what shows improvement in my presentation or speaking ability, the measure should be, can you use these kind of devices? Can you make them feel natural? Can you deliver them with the right emphasis? Not, oh, what thesaurus word do I need to swap out right here?
And I think one of the very clever thing about these rhetorical devices or patterns is that it's easier for our speaker to remember, because I think our brain wired in a way that we remembers pattern. 所以如果我们今天我们的 speech 里面有类似像这样子的 pattern 的话，其实对你来讲是非常好记忆的，而且不只是你很好记，你的听众他们也很好去记这些重点。而且我觉得有一个非常 amazing 的事情，就是你不太记得，或者是甚至这些人全部都没有使用任何的 PowerPoint。Perhaps Celeste Healy, she used a PowerPoint, but that was definitely not the memorable part of it. But everyone else that we talked about here, of course there were no PowerPoint. It was just them talking. But their words and the way they deliver their content, it's just so powerful. You don't need a visual.
One thing that I'd also like to emphasize that Sherry just touched on was that idea of patterns and repeating. If you listen to our last episode where we looked at Taylor Swift lyrics versus the Three Little Pigs fable, that idea of a chorus or a refrain where we repeat a message over and over again is a really powerful device. And using these kind of parallelism or contrasting patterns is something that, in the case of Dr. King, he went back to, like the same pattern repeating over and over again, but it is memorable and it brings an idea into their head. Even in a business presentation, we'll talk about, okay, you're not trying to be inspirational per se, but if you have key ideas, that thing, what do you want them to know? And what do you want them to remember, to drill into their head? Using these strong contrasts in a pattern can help really hammer in the idea to your audience. This is our business strategy. These are our founding vision or morals of our company, and just hammer them in. It is actually very important. Well, we hope that you enjoyed this peek back into contrasting ideas and a look at 200 episodes ago at parallelism, and you'll think about what makes a powerful presentation or speech. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.